Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our March Productivity in Tech Roundtable. This is where we get together with developers from all over the US and hopefully the world one day. We're still trying to get our first international guest. And we talk about a topic that's important to developers. And this week is no different. Well, it's a little different because you're not going to be hearing my voice as much. Instead, I'm going to immediately pass it over to our moderator for this week, the one Mr. Joe Zack from the Coding Blocks podcast.
Hey, well, thanks, Jay. And Jay and I talked a little bit about this ahead of time. I was looking for some ideas, and I kind of sent this topic idea over. And the idea here was that I've frequently worked with a lot of developers who have actively managed their career away from going into management. And I was really curious as to why that seems to be a pervasive attitude. And actually, even if that is a pervasive attitude, or if I'm just kind of seeing some bias based on the types of people that I've worked with. And so I thought it'd be really cool to talk about your guys' experiences with that and try to maybe kind of get to the heart of that and think about the other side. So let's get into it. First, we want to take a little spin around, do a little introduction. I guess starting with Jay.
We can't hear you.
Okay, there we go. Much better. See, this is why I can't be a manager. I can't even manage my microphone. I'm Jay Miller. I am the founder of Productivity in Tech, which is an online community designed to help people in the tech space, specifically developers, work to be more productive, not just at work, but also in life. I look at all the nerdy productivity stuff so that you don't have to. You can focus on making, get requests and actually pushing stuff out.
All right, and I've already been kind of introduced here. So Joe Zack, work on Coding Blocks podcast, been a developer for a long time, and I'm one of those guys who's been actively managing my career away from management.
I'm next, I guess. Yeah. I'm Will Gant. I'm half of the Complete Developer podcast and one of the founders of Developer Launchpad. I've been writing code since let's say it's been a long time. Bush was president, not that one, his dad. So I've done a lot of different languages, and I for a long time tried to manage my career away from being in management, and now I'm trying to go towards it.
Coolio. Hello. Oh, I'm assuming. Are you done, Will?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't want to be rude. I'm Darren. I've been a developer for about 6 years, mostly in the .NET Microsoft stack. However, I am now getting into big data with Spark and Scala. I haven't really had the time in development yet to really steer my career toward management or to keep in debt or away from management. So, that's me.
All right, well, cool. Well, let's dive in here. So the first question I want to ask is, even if I mentioned there was a lot of people I knew that were actively managing their career away from management, but I kind of wonder, like, do they even need to? Is there an expectation for programmers to eventually transition into lead or management roles? And I guess, let's start with Jay.
So this was new for me because, and I think I've mentioned this before, when I started Productivity in Tech, I had not actually held a tech job. I wanted to get into development, and it was one of these areas where people were like, you need to find something in your area that works. So for me, the idea was I just need to get into development. And now that it's been, 3 or 4 years of programming, I actually come from a background of the military. So my knowledge of management is a very rigid, systematic process. Basically, you put in your time, you show that you can lead, and then you get put in that leadership role. And ultimately, you're always training the people underneath you to replace you so that you can replace the person above you. So for me, I would say I don't necessarily think there's a need for for everyone to go towards a developer management space, but I'm often really confused as to how people prepare to be a developer, because for me it was always, prepare to be a developer manager. For me it was always, you're here long enough, eventually you learn everything and you got to teach the people underneath you. So congratulations, you got the job. As a new developer, especially in this panel, I wouldn't even know where to start when it comes to what can I do to make myself prepared to be a developer manager.
Yeah, so what do you think, Will? Is there an expectation for programmers to eventually transition up to that type of role?
I think it's changed over the years. We had that cohort that I was kind of in that was more the nerdy tech people that, we had a lot more folks that got into tech because they didn't want to be around people. And so the expectation with them was, yeah, you're going to continue being a developer till the end. And now I think we've kind of shifted back the other way, and you've got more people that are like, no, this is part of a whole normal life. And so I do want to get into management because ultimately that's a goal. So I can kind of see both sides of it, I guess, at this point. And I would say my own evolution was that I got pushed into a management role early and was not prepared for it. I was too young. I was immature and not ready. And so I tried to avoid it because I thought, okay, this will be horrible, anytime I do it. And then later, as I matured and I started seeing things, I'm like, no, that's just, I was in a bad position then. So now I'm actually working towards it. So it kind of goes back and forth a little bit.
All right. What do you think, Darren?
Well, yes. To answer your question with a Boolean yes or no. The reason why I say so is in kind of Microsoft and the job I did before, there's actually tracks you could follow. It's like at level 1, you're this, at level 2, you're this. And it was, I don't know. I've never, no, sorry, I'm going to take that back. I have never, from the jobs I've seen, I was never expected to be a manager. No one has ever come up to me in my development career and been like, hey, you're going to be a manager. We're going to train you to be a manager. I do feel, though, at the job I'm at now at Microsoft, although this is only for my team, that I might be expected to go into a lead position. So I might take over one module and lead other software developer engineers, but not go into a direct manager role. Especially at least Microsoft, you need to be there for quite a few years in order to actually get to be a manager. So from what I've heard and from what I've known, no, but I've never really worked enough at one place for people to start considering me like, oh, you should be a manager or not.
That's really interesting. When I first started programming, there used to be a lot of talk around how there weren't really good paths for people who wanted to stay in programming. And it seemed like if you ever wanted promotion, if you ever wanted more money, then management was the only track. And so it's makes me happy to hear that you guys don't feel like that's the only way to go.
Yeah, no, there's at Microsoft, there's plenty of levels. There's one track for management, one track for lead, one track for just a regular developer. In my previous job, they had tracks for PM development, managerial stuff, as well. Actually, quite interesting. There's a book, I can't remember the name, but it actually had an essay about how. Oh, hi, kitty. Joe, do you have a cat?
Yes, I do.
Why is he kitten? That's cute.
It's a big one.
There's actually an essay written about how the kind of pay scale track has to split into the management scale, and the non-management scale. And I've also read the books like, how do you give people more money, like in a science track where they're not really doing more work? It's like, how do you handle that? It's quite interesting. There's actually a lot of good texts on management and how to correctly manage people, which I'm interested in. But yeah, it's another talk for another day.
One of the things when you mentioned, Darren, that there are specific tracks that people were expected to go down. I feel like there's a big difference between like a lead developer and like a developer manager role. And I think Will and I were talking about that a little bit beforehand. In my opinion, eventually you're going to be the senior man there. If you stay at a place long enough, eventually the people around you will start disappearing and there will be more and more people that are junior to your experience, both in the development space and on those specific projects. So I think having some base leadership qualities is super important. But when I think of, what's the difference between a lead developer, a senior engineer, and a developer manager? I've had managers that don't know much code at all, and I've had senior engineers that are just like, yeah, cool, go talk to the manager about payroll issues and things like that. And I think that's the real question of, are we talking about the senior engineer that has the widest knowledge on the projects that we're working on, or are we talking about the developer manager who's not only responsible for the project's success, but the overall welfare of the developers underneath them?
You have a very good point that there is a big difference. However, I don't want to hog the spotlight, but if you give me time, I do. There is, I can't talk. In my team, I can totally see the distinction between a manager and a lead. But do you have a point there? It's like, are we talking about leads or are we talking about managers?
Well, and I've done both, so I think the lead eventually bleeds into being a real manager. Like, it's the training ground for the real management side, because you learn how to lead people, and then you get to be more responsible for their welfare. I mean, I've been in the situation. My first gig, I had to fire somebody, and was not prepared for that emotionally or anything else, because it was somebody that had a sick kid, and like, they defrauded the company, and it was just not pleasant. So I I like the fact that I'm in a lead position right now and moving towards more of the management thing instead of just being a straight up manager from the get go. I think that works a little bit better with getting acclimated to the team. So.
Oh, those great answers. So it sounds like we've all kind of said, very similar things. We think there's almost like two tracks for career progression. There's a strict developer track, and if that's all you want to do, if that's what you want to like, it sounds like that's an option nowadays. And so let's talk about that other track a little bit. What do you think it is about that management track that kind of scares some of these developers, or what are those skills or abilities or personality traits that maybe kind of differentiate those tracks? And we'll start with Jay.
Well, for me, it was simply, I want to have my fingers on the code. Like, that is something that I've always loved. And I mean, like I said, coming from a military background, you learn that, as the lower level Marine, you're actually out there tipping cable, you're setting up networks, you're doing all of these things. And then it seems the more and more you progress upward up the ranks, the less time you spend actually doing those things, and the more time you spent either supervising or doing administrative work. And for me, that was where I was. I didn't want to be a manager. I didn't want to be, senior level, because I actually liked doing the work.
All right, what do you think, Will?
I would say it's a lot of the same. The other thing too is the loss of control, because like when you the first time you have a direct report that you tell to do something and they do it in a completely boneheaded way, like that, the reaction to that will make or break you as a manager. So you start out and you're like, okay, they did something in a dumb way. If I react to this and go, oh, they're an idiot and I've got to take this over and all that, you're not going to be a good manager. But if you go, okay, let's talk to them and get the learnings out of this where they can grow, then you're probably in a better position to end up managing. So I would say that's a big aspect of it. And the loss of control was the big pain point for me.
Yeah, what do you think, Darren?
Yeah, to go off what Will was saying, I've read and heard a few times. Yeah, it's just that loss of control and being like, do this, all right, I'll get it done in this time. And anyway, but I agree. From what I've heard, is the lower you are, the more hands in. When I was a vendor at Microsoft, I was the person who sat down and wrote code. That is what I did 8 hours a day. At times I really didn't like it. At times it was great. And actually somebody at Microsoft when I was a vendor was like, if you want to keep coding at Microsoft, stay as a vendor. So now that I'm full time, I haven't really told any vendors to do anything. However, a lot of my time now has been like configuring different things, and configuring things. I'm now getting into coding, but I see my lead, and he's taking more time to lead us and be like take care of like the overarching software decisions. And have my manager who doesn't even know the code. He knows how the different modules fit together, but he's never written a single line of code for this. It's quite interesting. So I think what a lot of programmers don't like, is from not knowing what managers do, just the loss of code. I mean, like, I can't get my hands in there. And that's the reason why us developers kind of get into the developer tech space, is to write code. We enjoy doing that. I was really happy when I finally got to start writing code at my job. Um, and I also kind of agree with Will. It's firing people is horrible. My boss at U-Haul was going to fire somebody, and he called in sick the day he was going to fire somebody. And I knew somebody at Microsoft who had to fire his own friend because his friend wasn't performing up to snuff. So it's just really extremely different. It's kind of like going from an object-oriented programming language to a functional-oriented programming language. It's different. You have to think differently. You have to act differently. And I think for a lot of developers who went through their blood, sweat, and tears to learn code, to finally change it to something different is a horrifying experience.
Yeah, it sounds like the overall kind of theme that I'm hearing here is that it means less of what most programmers like, and more of the kinds of things that we don't necessarily like difficult conversations or loss of control.
Yes.
So that's really interesting. For some reason, I expected there to be more about the things that you don't like, and I guess that's kind of me projecting my own feelings. Like I don't like the idea of spending more time in Jira and less time in like Visual Studio. So to me, it's more about the things that I don't want to do rather than the things I want to do more of. So it was interesting to hear your perspectives.
Hey, Joe. I'm just going to quickly go. I'm actually going to get that book I talked about in case somebody actually wants to know it. So I'll be right back.
Cool.
While we're waiting on that, you mentioned, not wanting to spend more time in Jira and actually wanting to spend more time in Vim, if you're like me. But there are people that love just living in Jira. And this is where it's interesting, because I've always thought, like, if you want to go management track, development isn't even necessary. You could go product manager or project management, and then use that, because you already have that management side, and then you're just doing less of the project side, but you're also doing more of that overarching, see what's going on. And I think that is something that a lot of developers even think. They go, well, hey, there are people that love managing projects. Like, they don't have to know what's in the code. They just want to see the final result. Why not let them be the managers and let me stick to what I do best?
Yeah, I've got a buddy who makes the most beautiful spreadsheets and charts and graphs and flow charts, and like, you give them a problem and these beautiful artifacts just fall out of it in the documentation, and it's fantastic. And he's a wonderful programmer too. And I think a lot of those kind of organizational and abstraction tools and skills that he's built up over the years really help him in both. And so I think he's an excellent lead, and that's definitely the kind of skills that I would like to improve on, my ability to kind of deconstruct things and communicate them really well. And so even if I don't want to go down the management track, I think there's a lot of things I could learn from the management track that would help me in my day-to-day job.
Yeah, my take on the management track, I guess, is, as developers, we like to build systems that do things. And to a large degree, that's what management actually is. It's just you build systems with people, so you're dealing with a lot of interesting failure modes. It's kind of like programming applied to people, but much more challenging. So that's my take on it. I would also say, as far as like the writing of specs, I was actually surprised. It's been 4 or 5 years now. I had one day where I just wrote specs all day, and I did the same thing the next, and I got all the way through a whole week with no code. And I got to Friday night, and I'm like, I'm not really that tired. I actually had a pretty good week. And I was like, that's very strange. Yeah. So I think that's something that grows on you over time too.
That's a cool little identity crisis there. Like, oh no.
Yeah, I'm becoming one of them,
Right.
like, You're going to put the special glasses on, and you're going to see the pointy-haired boss sitting there instead of this bearded redneck.
Well, speaking of the word boss, you mentioned that it is a system in itself. I mean, there's a phrase called the business operating system that's designed around that idea of like, okay, how do we set up our business like a piece of software? You have tests that are put in place. You have, SOPs that are put in place. You have all of these things that it runs like a fluid program. And as a manager, you're the one defining those outputs. So I think that developers could, if they think about it in a way of like, okay, instead of my program being a physical, product or a SaaS, implementation, what if I treated, my employees, as the actual code, as the coding blocks, as Joe Zack would say, and
Modules.
yeah, as the modules, and then I look at all of these different things that have to happen, and I treat those as classes or methods, depending on what language you're using. And I say, okay, what are the rules around this particular method? When someone calls in sick and they don't have any more sick time left, or when someone has to take a leave of absence, what are these systems that I can put in place to make my job feel programmatic?
I would also say that, being in the military, you experienced the business operating system. I mean, you guys had a colonel.
Oh, man.
Always got to bust out a dad joke every so often.
Yeah.
Darren, you're back. You had that book?
Yes, it's amazing. I actually had to buy this for school. It is, I can't read backwards, but it's that. The human side of managing technical innovation. It's great. It's fantastic. This is the second edition. I don't know if they've released a third edition, but it has things I said, like the dual career track. It has quite an interesting essay about how sticky notes were made and how basically this person had to, he went to the...
He was making airplane parts, right?
No, I don't remember. But basically he went to... the engineers is like, oh my God, I have this great idea. And then the engineer's like, we can't engineer that. And so he actually had to engineer it himself and it didn't fly off. So he, with his manager, actually went like a door-to-door salesman's like, here's free sticky notes. And then that's how it blew up. And they're like, oh, sticky notes are a thing. Wow. But this is a fantastic book. I love it. I probably will get to reading it someday.
Well, I know you just read Peopleware too. And I know that's a great book for kind of a... Not entirely?
The Mythical Man Month.
Oh, what did I say? Yeah, sorry about that. But
Yes.
Both of those books, I think of kind of like, if any programmer is going to read any management books, it's probably one of those two.
Yes, there's if you go to Learn Programming on Reddit and then go to books, there's a link to the top books that all developers should read. It's from Coding Horror. The Peopleware is actually on one of them. I have that. I'm getting to it. I'm right now going through Code. I'm really excited about that. So are we going on question 3? Have we done that yet?
Nope. Question 3 coming up. So my question was, it's kind of in a similar vein. Do you have any advice or suggestions out there for programmers who are looking to break into management? And we want to start with Jay again.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, that, like I said before, just treating it like a system, treat it like you would treat a program, track it like you would track your goals. You're not going to go from junior programmer to developer manager, at least, well, you might, but I think that there should be some paths in between, and you have to be able to identify those career tracks, have a plan, and then execute it. And definitely check out the Complete Developer podcast, because they've been working through goals really well. And I know those tracks are one of those things that they've covered in the past.
Yeah, you want to follow up on that, Will?
Yeah, I guess that was a heck of a handoff there. I would say, kind of what I've done a lot is just actually step up and lead the team. In other words, if you start coming up with suggestions for how to improve processes and you can get the other team members on board, like your management will see that, and that will also get you practice at it. And it makes everything more efficient anyway. So it makes it easier to work there. That would probably be the biggest thing. Another thing I would probably do is I would go to my manager and start going, hey, I want to learn how to do this. How would I start? Because that's somebody that's already succeeded doing it. So you might as well steal their tactics. I did have a really good manager early on that gave me the best piece of advice that I've ever gotten about managing developers. And he said that all development managers there's only really two types. There's crap funnels and crap umbrellas. A crap funnel takes everything from up top and dumps it on their people, and a crap umbrella keeps it off of them. And he said, after you get those, if you figure out which one you are of those, then you can figure out whether you should be managing or not.
I know which one I want.
Yeah.
Manager.
Yeah. Well, you got to bear in mind the crap umbrella manager, it lands on them.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Darren?
Yes. So, interesting ways. One is, I'm sorry. I have two different thoughts going in my head. One is to try to, I know I'm going to use this phrase and it's going to sound horrible, butter up to your manager. Know what your manager is having problem with and try to take it away. Basically, from what I've heard, is try not to be a problem for your manager. That's one thing, because if the manager is like, oh, you took this on with initiative, that's cool. In all the jobs I've had, they're like, show us initiative, show that you can take and go do something and go fly with it. And even if it's wrong, if you have a good manager, they'll be okay if you fail. They'll be like, okay, you failed. What can we learn from this? So just, in my opinion, it would be figure out what your manager's having problem with and go take it and go run with it. Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. If you can learn what your managers or your bosses' problems are and speak to those problems, a lot of times you can be saying the same things or solving the same problems, but by reframing the way you communicate, you can really speak their language and make things better. An example I like to say is, like, don't go to your boss and say, hey, we need to refactor to make things better. You can go to your boss and say, we need to refactor because we'll be able to solve these kinds of tickets faster and we'll have less sort of defects in these areas. Both same result or same thought process, same results, but by reframing that in terms of their problems, then you're speaking up the chain better.
Yes, I would to follow about speaking their language. For example, that is true. If I talk to anybody, in Joe, if I talk to you about C#, you'll totally understand what I'm talking about. If I go to my girlfriend Tierney and I go, let's talk about C#, let's talk recursion and binary trees, and she's gonna be like, what? It's the same thing with a manager, and we have to learn how to talk to the managers. So, for example, they care about numbers, money, stuff like that. And reading books. Like, books is fantastic. Books about management styles, management theories, to start understanding that, because you can be a manager, but if you can't get people to follow you, or if you can't lead, then you're not going to be a good manager. And there's a lot of theories on how to do that and on how to figure it out. And it's actually a big field. So yeah, I'd just also like to add, read books. Books are fantastic. The internet is a great place to find great books.
Yeah, we mentioned a few of those.
Something I didn't even think about until after Darren was talking about speaking with your manager. Let your manager know that you would like to go into management. I think that's a good example of being open and transparent. Obviously, I think any good manager isn't going to be like, oh, well, you're trying to take my job from me. I don't think it works that way. Or at least I don't think it should work that way. But they may be able to help you out because they probably have their own aspirations. I don't think people just get to the point of management and go, oh, now that I've made management, it's time to sit here until I retire. I mean, they're usually looking at either a director role, some kind of VP role, anything that'll help continue to progress them upwards as well. So if you make the intention known, hey, I would like to get into the responsibilities that you're doing now, once they move up, they already know they can start tailoring you to kind of fill that position as time gets closer to that.
To go off that, the keyword is if you have a good manager. I've gone into rants with people who are going into development with my senior developer that I spoke to. It's like, you can either have a good manager or a bad manager. So yeah, if you have a good manager, yeah, you can totally do that. If you have a bad manager, and it's like,
Then you find out immediately.
yes, yeah, actually, yeah, very true. You find out. I mean, it's like, I want to be a manager. Is like, you want my job? No, fine. Yes, I do. I'll go away now. Something like
Game
that.
of Thrones.
That said, there's usually someone around you. Like there's some manager that you can find, especially with, all these great communities out there. Find someone that's doing what you'd like to do, and just be open with them and try to learn as much as you can from them. I think that's the key to success in any kind of role. Find someone that's doing the thing that you want to be doing and learn as much as you can from them, and then try to implement and try to emulate a lot of the things that they're not only teaching you, but that they're showing you through their own actions.
And of course, I've always got to mention online communities. If you join a Slack, like Complete Developer, Coding Blocks, and of course, Productivity and Tech, and you go in there and you talk about the things that you want to do and try to, talk about how you're trying to get there, you're going to find a lot of people who have a lot of opinions and a lot of helpful things and perspectives that are going to be able to help you along that way. So if you don't have those people locally, or if you just want more of it, then those communities are out there and fantastic. And so I think that wraps up the questions. I feel really good about the things we talked about. I've got a list of notes here of things that I want to look into more. So I really appreciate everyone's time and indulging me in my topic idea. And so let's take a few minutes here. We're going to go around. I guess I'll start here and kind of tell you how you could reach me. And then that'll be it. So Joe Zack, almost all of my energy goes into at Coding Blocks. So if you want to tweet me there or look up that website or podcast, that's where you can find my energy output. And Will?
You can reach me at the Complete Developer Podcast. And on Twitter, that's at Complete Dev Pod. Those are probably the best ways to get a hold of me, honestly. That's most of my effort.
My turn now. I have a Twitter handle. My Twitter is ActiveFireball. If you want to reach me there. Additionally, if any of y'all who are listening are in the Everett, Mill Creek, Washington State area, I also have a coding meetup that meets up every Tuesday from 6 to 8 at a cafe called Spotted Cow. You can find that on meetup.com. But if you're in the area, come join. I'd love to talk to you.
All right, great. Jay, you want to take us out?
Absolutely. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at KJAY Miller, or you can follow Productivity in Tech at Prod in Tech, one word. And if you've enjoyed this conversation and you want to keep on talking, as Joe Zack mentioned, there are a bunch of different communities you can jump into. There's the Coding Blocks Slack. There's a Complete Developer community. And of course, there's a Productivity in Tech premium group, which we sit down and we have discussions like these, but we also talk about how to improve ourselves as developers and as people. Sometimes we get to nerd out on productivity stuff, whether it's apps, tips, or tricks, but it's more about making people better developers, better people, better whatever it is you want to be better at. So if you want to learn more about that, you can head over to productivityintech.com and then hit either the premium button, or you can go to productivityintech.com/join and learn more. If you want to be a guest on the next Roundtable, head over to productivityintech.com/roundtable, and there you will either see a link to this existing one or a link to our upcoming topic. And if you have a topic, be sure to either email it to us at info@productivityintech.com, or you can just reach out to us on Twitter as always. But if you're listening on YouTube, be sure to hit subscribe and give us a thumbs up and let us know below what are your thoughts and things that maybe we forgot. And of course, if you're listening on the podcast, be sure to go tell a friend about it so they can learn about this and the many other topics we'll have coming in the future. But I guess for Productivity in Tech, I am Jay Miller, and thanks for watching. Have a good one.